All right, folks, it is time for step 3 of learning to read and learn something effectively. Let's talk about our effective reading step 3. So, as a reminder, step 1 was creating a plan, figuring out your goals. Step 2 was putting things into sections and starting to create an outline for them. Step 3 is actually practicing the process of remembering after you have read. So step 2 is just about organizing the material. Step 3 is about recalling it. So you have to get a sense of what you're reading, and you have a system to organize it. So now we're going to take the step from recognition to recall. I suggest you actually take these starting steps with each section you read and outlined above, because they're really meant to work together. So once you're done with the outline, you come here and take the next set of steps immediately before going on to a new section. And then I'll get to connecting material between sections. Once you've gone through in a section, and you've taken some useful notes, you'll want to get your brain involved fairly quickly. So here are the things that you can do right after a section. You could do an oral summary. So immediately after finishing and outlining, look away and speak out loud the basics of the material. Maybe you've even got somebody that you can tell it to. Be like, let me tell you what I just learned, and see how much of it you can remember. You could make a mind map on a blank piece of paper. You put a main concept of your section in the center and write a bunch of other stuff around it that you can remember. You could do a quick write. So take out a blank piece of paper and just literally write down sentences of what you heard, a paragraph of what you remember. And if you were working about something like a math problem or solving a problem in engineering, then you might immediately look away and try to solve a version of that type of problem, or at least write down the steps to solving it so that you can try to recall it. So those are immediate. They should each only take maybe 2 minutes after you read a section. And don't worry if you don't remember things right away. That's actually kind of the point, that you're going to even immediately sort of forget. So give yourself a little bit as best you can, then go back and check what you wrote against your outline. Do make sure if you wrote down something completely wrong, like forgetting things, fine. But if you've got something completely wrong in your quick memory test, that you make a note of the correct answer and make a note to check yourself on that in the future. You do not want to cement in wrong answers. That can be a problem. So once you've done this with a few sections, maybe you want to try doing it on larger sections. So it depends on how you are doing this work. If you are taking very small sections and doing them in a row. So let's say you're doing a section, then taking a small break, then a section, then a small break, then a section, which would work really well if you're doing the Pomodoro method, which is the 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. So you could easily do 3 or 4 sections in a row. And then you take a longer break, like a 15-minute break, and then do a complete recall activity where the goal is now to remember the stuff from all the sections that you read that day. Or maybe you're doing sections later on in a day. You want to come back and try to remember all the stuff you remember using any of those methods above, out loud, writing it down, trying to mind map it. Anything you can do, try to put that information together. And especially at the end of a day of work, it's a good time. Another good time to do it, if you worked on it varying ways throughout the day, might be literally at the end of your day, like when you're getting close to going to bed, backtrack briefly and see how much of it you can recall. And again, you're just checking yourself with your outline. You're not trying to teach it to yourself, just seeing what you can remember. If you are spreading this out more, so if you're only doing maybe 2 sections per day and they're really spread out, or a section per day because you really want to spread things along, maybe you're doing interleaving where you mix it with other subjects, then every couple of days or every couple of sections, you want to do the same thing. Check in with your outline and do it before you start the next one. So especially day to day. So if you read a section on a Monday and you're going to do another section on Tuesday, start with recall. Start by going, what did I read yesterday? And see what I can remember. If it's been the end of the week and you've done this every day, then what you want to say is, what did I do from the beginning? And see if you can remember all of it. Again, don't worry, you're not going to remember all of it very quickly, but if you do this consistently, you are practicing the recalling, and also you'll start to notice areas that you pick up quickly and others that you have more trouble with. So you can make kind of notes in your outlines, put some extra markings next to things that are like, I have not gotten this 3 days in a row. Maybe it's time to put a little extra into that. So a couple extra things that go along with using recall on sort of specific kinds of areas. If what you're trying to learn is terminology, you might want to do your recall in a little bit of a different way. You might want to take all of your terms and make flashcards and do those at the beginning of every section so that you see how many of those words you remember. Or you might want to have a list of the terms and try to remember them, or you can just do it in your outline if you can cover them up, literally cover up the definitions, leave the terms in place, and then try to think through what each of the terms means. And if you do this every time you start a new day or a new section, you'll pick those words up quicker than you think you will. Another one that is a little different might be if you're using this reading to learn to solve problems, in which case what you might want to do is at the end of a day or the end of a section is find a problem that is your setup for next time. And the first thing you do is start with, can I solve this problem? What are the steps of solving this problem? And that way you have that in front of you. You can also leave yourself leading questions to help you remember. If your goal is to sort of get something conceptual, that might be useful. So at the end of whatever section or the end of day, leave yourself some kind of hint or information, and then start the next day with, do you remember what this is? Can you describe the steps of da 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 da? And now you have to go, okay, I can describe the steps of that. So you're not starting with nothing. It gives you somewhere to go, and also reminds you of what's important. So again, you want to go back to that step one. You look at your goals and say, what am I actually trying to learn here? Because that can be the basis for your leading questions. So this is both immediately after the section, you do an immediate recall. At the end of a whole bunch of sections or at the end of a day, you do a general recall of everything you've done. And the next time you're about to start the material, you do a general recall of everything you've done. If you keep doing that, you see how much recall you're getting in this. This is where it starts to cement. And again, those first chunk of times, you're going to forget things. You're going to lose them. That's the way it works. But it will get better. It's like when I learn students' names. I walk around the classroom trying to guess their names for a week and a half, and I get a lot of them wrong for a week and a half. And then at some point it just clicks, and I'm like, I know all of your names, and it's fabulous. So I promise this will be up. Okay, so I'm updating this part of the document, so we'll have all that information. Tomorrow's our last day to talk about effective reading, which will be talk about now you've finished the whole section. What do you need to do to make sure that you actually accomplished your goals and that you will be able to effectively learn this, or in some cases, remember it for an exam that's not happening for a while. So that's our effective reading. Okay, so on to my other favorite topic, which is taking apart COVID-19 research. Okay, so I'm going to talk about masks because I have a variety of ups and downs with them. So, disclaimer item 1. Most of the time, wearing a mask is not going to hurt you so long as you do not have to touch or adjust the mask. Be sure you don't touch or adjust the mask. Most of the time, it will not hurt you. However, never assume it's actually protective either. That is always my rule. But so, a friend of mine, who's actually usually a real smart person, posted an article, and I will post a link to the article from ZME Science, which, this is clearly a zine that's, science people trying to talk about science stuff. And it says that the guidance on face masks have changed, but the science really hasn't changed because there is a new study. This is always my favorite part. And where's the actual data that says that the risk of influenza infection reduced by 45%, SARS reduced by 74%, and COVID-19 reduced by 96%, respectively, is what the study says. And then they have a really adorable little diagram that shows what those would look like on a curve that makes no sense at all. It's a cute article. Okay. So here's the problem. I need to see the data on this. So that's what I did. I went looking for the data. It does have read the analysis here. Yay. All right. So a couple things we need to talk about. First of all, whenever you see a reduced percentage, you need to know what number you're talking about. So when you say that the infection reduced by a certain percentage, that means it reduced by the amount of the percent that it would be before you wore a mask. And that's going to come up in a moment here when I actually look through the data of this actual study. So this is, again, a preprint. It has not yet been peer reviewed. So I am partially doing the process of peer reviewing, except that I'm not going to send my information back to the journal. Anyway, but I think that's important that we go through this with a critical eye, like I would be doing if I peer reviewed a paper. And I have been a peer reviewer, so I do know what I would do. So first of all, it's a meta-analysis, meaning that they found other studies. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to go hunt down those other studies today, maybe in the future. We'll see. And of all the studies that might exist out there for mask wearing for respiratory illnesses, and I don't know what that number is because actually they don't give it to me, they found 21 studies that met their inclusion criteria. So this is a meta-analysis of 21 studies. It's not that many for a meta-analysis, just as a note. It's not super low, it's also not super high, and they're all different. So that's important. But they do give me the search details, essentially, that they used, and they do give me each study that they used and how they included and excluded it, and I don't mind their criteria. Most of it's pretty good. Okay. Then they do statistical analysis, in which they put together odds ratios with confidence intervals, and then p-values, which they're looking for less than your standard 0.05 for that kind of stuff. That's fine. All right, let's go look at the numbers because I think that's actually the most important thing. I don't mind the stats. I don't mind this stuff. Here's what I want to know. First of all, they looked at two different types of studies, and I think this is extremely important. They looked at studies that looked at populations of healthcare workers and populations of other people. And when you split those studies up, it is pretty noted that most of the studies, and I do mean most, were healthcare workers. So when I actually look at their study group, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 in the healthcare workers one, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in the non-healthcare worker one. So I'm going to be really clear. I am not in any way, shape, or form even really interested in the healthcare worker one. I assume that when your face is in the face of people with respiratory illnesses, that masks are helpful. And as far as I can tell, mostly the data shows that, and there are lots of good data points, and one kind of oddball one where maybe there wasn't. But anyway, mostly good data points that healthcare workers should wear masks. You are not going to change my mind on that. That's fine. It's the non-healthcare worker ones that I care about, and they're very different. And some of their numbers are a little bit funky. So let's talk about what percent change actually means. And here's what it means. And I'll use one of the ones that's pretty close because it's a good way to explain it. So for one of these studies, and they give me the exact numbers in this, which is my favorite. They give you the total events. So how many people were looked at, how many were in a mask group, how many were in a control group, and how many then got sick. So in this case, the mask group and the control group are pretty similar. It's 258 in the mask group and 279 in the control group. So the control group is slightly larger, but not a lot. And the number of people who got an respiratory illness, I didn't double check which study this was, in the mask wearing group was 18. You'll notice that's not 0, it's 18. And in the control group, it's 28. It's 10 more out of a fairly large number. But 10 is about half of 18. Or actually 18 is like 2/3 of 28 is essentially what it is. So what they say is that you have like a 1/3 reduction. So this could be a 33% reduction. What that approximately means is you move from, let's see, 20, so it's about 10, it's a little less than 10. So you move from about an 8% chance of catching it to about a 9% chance of catching it. Those numbers aren't exact. That's the like 33% chance. Those are both really tight numbers, to be clear. They're almost too tight to really say much about. There's only one study in which nobody with masks got sick, and it was a very low number study. And I would definitely want to go look at it. And it was related to something really specific. I think it was, yes, H1N1 on a plane. So I need to check that study out. But that makes a lot of sense that on a plane, it might make a really big difference. But some of the rest of these are just large scale studies. Also, they're in different places. So some of them are population studies, and the ones that are the broader scale population have less percentage improvements. The ones that are employees and relatives are a little bit better, as in people who are taking care of them, or household. Household is a big one. And then they note that there's some question of adherence, which makes it actually kind of difficult to tell. I'd have to go back again and look at that data. Those are cluster randomized trial, meaning they literally put people in groups and randomized who did and didn't wear stuff. And most of those come out with much less change. So these really high percentage changes mostly are in healthcare workers, not regular populations. Most of the regular population data is barely separate from random. The p-values are kind of junk, and actually the overall chi-squared p-value for the non-healthcare workers is 0.08, which I hate to tell you, this is non-significant. So what's the reality of this paper? Well, reality one, I need to go back and look at these studies if I want to actually get a sense of them, because it's a meta-analysis and it doesn't give me everything. But the meta-analysis of the analysis in the meta-analysis actually seems to say that wearing masks doesn't make that much difference at all unless you are a healthcare worker. So, by the way, the real key from this, so the regular person takeaway from this is, it certainly isn't going to hurt you to wear a mask, but do not feel overconfident. It may not help you either. But the second real person takeaway from this is that all these events were low. Like, all of them were low. There were less than 10% of people in general who picked up a disease, period, from any of these. Respiratory diseases do not pass as easily as we'd like to think unless you were in very tight quarters and stuff is spewing on you. That's healthcare workers. So feel free to wear a mask, but also don't panic. So this also goes along with my, when you're outside, maybe you don't need one. These are all indoors and the percentages are low. Outdoors, it's going to be even more exciting. But I think it's also an important case of check out the data, even when you think it comes from a source that's reasonable, and understand what percentages actually mean. So reducing the risk of infection by 54% could mean that instead of 5 people getting infected, 3 do, and out of like 1,000. It's real tight numbers. And noting that, and again, that's in healthcare workers. So these are not as good of numbers as they would like you to imagine. And that's what I think is important. And one of the main reasons we tell people that people are careful to not do it is we don't want to create a false sense of security. So don't feel overly secure, but also continue to not panic. It's fine. All right, so that is my generalized review of why you can't believe the headlines of anything. You need to look at the data, and why the data is sometimes maybe not that important. And I'll put all these links in the box when I'm done. All right, time to go have office hours. Bye.